The Swedish Cv90 Mark IV is probably the worst variant of the Cv90 in the game right now. With a top speed of 70 kilometers per hour forward and 45 kilometers per hour reverse, this thing is quite zippy, and it definitely has that reverse speed. It is probably one of the fastest in the game, if not the fastest. Although forward speed wise, it is still outsped by wheeled vehicles. But for speed, I'm still gonna give this thing a 9 out of 10. Moving over to agility, this thing is quite maneuverable and quite small, so you shouldn't have an issue moving about the map. The only really issue I had was the braking system, but that's what you get when you're that speedy. So I'm gonna give this thing a 9 out of 10 for agility. Moving over to offense, this thing absolutely suffers. You do get access to a 30mm autocannon and a bunch of spike LR2s. The 30mm Bushmaster has a maximum armor penetration value of 116mm, which if you did not know makes it extremely hard to pen MBTs from the front. And with a projectile mass of 0.1 kg, this thing has absolutely no spall when you start to pen the enemy. So you either have to get really lucky on the amount of spall you get, or you have to hit the vital components every single time you fire this cannon. Moving over to the spikes, they're extremely inconsistent right now in Warthunder, and they kind of just go for whatever they want to. Most of the time you end up just getting pointless critical hits, but there is the rare occasion where you do get the one shot. The only time this 30mm was actually reliable was when you were hitting light tanks, so therefore I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10. Moving over to defense, this thing is a light tank, so you can't expect very much. Although with a bunch of the other CVs you do get spall liners, notably this one does not get one. In addition, you do have points on your tank that could be 50 cal'd. That being said, your armor is so weak it's actually your best defense because nothing spalls, but a majority of your time your crew just ends up getting domed anyways. So for defense, I'm also going to give this thing a 2 out of 10. Moving over to flexibility, this thing is decently flexible with an autocannon and a spike launcher, meaning you can take on multiple enemies at once, but notably compared to other Cv90s, you are missing IRST, meaning you're going to have more of a struggle against aircraft than the other variants. But you do get the spike launchers, which are extremely good at taking out helicopters. On top of that, your commander sight can see 24 times zoom, so you can snipe if you really wanted to. So for the flexibility, I'm going to give this thing a 6 out of 10. Moving on to electronics, this thing does get a laser rangefinder, laser warning system, and generation 3 thermals across all optics, but it is still lacking IRST. So for electronics, I'm going to give this thing a 7 out of 10. Moving over to survivability, as stated before, this thing is lacking a spall liner, so anything that pens is going to do a butt ton of damage. That is if it hits some piece of armor and it can spall. But with a 3-person crew and 2 of them sitting in the same basket, it doesn't take much to take out this vehicle. That being said, no armor is the best armor in Warthunder, so it has that going for it, and therefore things can't spall, so I'm going to give this thing a 5 out of 10 for survivability. Moving on to difficulty, the Cv90 Mark IV is definitely not for beginners. You have to know where to fire. You also have to know how to play the maps where you can flank the enemy and find their weak spots while also not getting spotted. And due to the fact that this vehicle isn't actually that good overall, so it's quite difficult to play, so with 1 being the hardest and 10 being the easiest, I'm going to give this thing 4 out of 10. Moving over to the fun value, I found this thing absolutely dreadful to play when there's other Cv90 options that are much better. The majority of matches I played in this thing, I actually just got more assists than I actually got domes, and that's not very rewarding in the game. And the fact that you can be up tiered to 11.7 and face vehicles that have much higher armor does not help the fact that this thing was not fun to play. So I'm going to give this thing a 2 out of 10 for fun value. Moving over to actual value, this thing offers no premiums because it is a tech tree vehicle, and it's also currently the end of the line in the tech tree. And with the Surf 9040 build before it being so much better, I have no clue why you would willingly grind the Cv90 Mark IV. So for the value of the Cv90 Mark IV, I'm going to give it a 1 out of 10, which on my grading scale gives this thing a low C. This is also funny enough the same grade I gave the F-16 OCU. If you were looking to torture yourself with the Cv90 Mark IV, I would just sit behind a ridge and kind of play defense, and then just peek out whenever someone unsuspecting passes by.